All right, we're now on chapter 16. This wonderful, wonderful speech, Sicha, that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Melech HaMashiach, made in 1969, right? 1969. Yes, 66, 1966, sorry, on Yutet Kislev. And it's talking about Yutet Kislev is, so to speak, the birthday of Chassidut. It's the day that the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, it wasn't Lubavitcher, the first Chabad Rebbe, got out of prison. And he was put into prison because he was spreading out the ideas of the Baal Shem Tov in a very, very unique way. And when he got out of prison, that was considered to be the day that from heaven was given the permission to spread out the ideas of Chassidut even more so. There wasn't going to be any opposition. And so it was. So we celebrate that day every year, the Chabad Hasidim, Yutet Kislev, the birthday of Chassidut. So you can ask a question, what's the big deal? I mean, okay, it's big for Chabad. For sure it's big for Chabad. That's the day that Chabad is. But I mean, the Chabad is one little tiny movement among Judaism. And Judaism itself is a little tiny religion among all the massive numbers of religions in the world. The Eastern religions, who knows how many there are, Eastern religions and branches of each one breaks up in all these different branches. And then there's the Western religion and the anyway, there's all these different religions in the world. And religion, Judaism is, I mean, perhaps one of the smallest. I mean, I'm sure there's religions with like two people in it, but you know, Judaism is the major famous religion, certainly the smallest of all. And among the religious, among the Jewish people, there's not that many that are actually, you know, really consider themselves to be religious. And among the religious, there's also a very small number of them that are considered to be Chabad. So, you know, what's the big thing? Chabad Chassidut, the birthday of Chabad Chassidut. So the answer is that Chabad is the only group in Judaism that really focuses solely on bringing Moshiach. That's the thing of Chabad, bringing Moshiach. The Chabad have a very great, very, very great leader. Their leaders are exceptional. And in that they encourage and inspire and motivate all of their followers to be totally devoted to Moshiach. And so what's so special about that? Well, Moshiach is going to be the person, the Jew, who is going to reveal the Creator in his creation. And it all depends on the Jews. How do I know? Because the only nation, race, religion, whatever you want to call it, that God gave his Torah to, publicly revealed himself, was the Jewish people. God publicly revealed himself. 3 million Jews all saw God face to face, heard God, received the Torah from God on Mount Sinai. And that was after they experienced the splitting of the sea and the going out of Egypt, the 10 plagues, and etc. And I know this is a bit fantastic, but you know, the whole life is pretty fantastic. Or it's not, you know, maybe life is just boring. So then the whole thing doesn't make any difference. But if you think life is fantastic, so this story is what makes it even more fantastic. Yes, there's going to be one person, one Jew, and he is going to return all of the world to think about only the Creator, not think about heaven, not think about hell, thinking only about what does the Creator want from me every moment. Every moment is a miracle. Every moment is a gift. Every moment is precious. Every moment belongs to me. And it's a personal gift from the Creator of the universe, unconditional. I can do whatever I want to with it. What do you want to do? What do you want to do with every moment? And that's the idea of the Moshiach. Is going to teach everyone how to use every moment to its fullest, Moshiach. And the only ones that are interested in bringing Moshiach is Chabad. And without the leader of Chabad, nobody would even think about it also. So the Rebbe explains this whole idea of thinking only about Moshiach and bringing Moshiach and bringing the good out of everybody and the good out of everything, revealing God in everything. This is called Chassidut, the teachings of Chassidut. And this, what they want to wake up in every single Jew and in every single aspect of the world is a Kabbalistic level, which is called pure essential godliness, or in Kabbalistic language, Yechida. Yechida is also the highest level of the soul. The soul has 5 levels or 5 dimensions to it, called Yechida. And this Yechida is also the highest dimension of everything in the universe. That's Yechida, and that's a Chassidut. And so the Rebbe wants to stress to us, and he wants to teach us, and this is the teaching of Moshiach, because the Rebbe is the Moshiach, that this aspect of Yechida, it does not preclude the other dimensions. It doesn't outshine them. It doesn't negate them. It doesn't nullify them. It doesn't make them worthless. It's not like if a person has, $1,000 in the bank and suddenly you give him $1 million, he doesn't care about the 1,000, and then you give him $1 billion, he doesn't care about the million. Then you give him $1 trillion and the million, all of a sudden the billion becomes, no. This is a whole, it's adding more and more meaning to every aspect of the world. So I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example of this, but maybe I got an example like this. Let's say, for instance, somebody gives you a present. You come from Scotland. You love everything in Scotland. I'm just giving you an example. Everything in Scotland really, really means something, but you're displaced. You're far away. You're in America. You long for your homeland, and that's it. So all of a sudden, you walk on the street, and you see, oh, here's a kilt from Scotland. Oh, it makes me remind me of my homeland. So he buys it. He buys it. And then someone comes and tells you, hey, this kilt from Scotland, it's not made in China. It's not, this is genuinely made in Scotland. Oh, so now it becomes a little bit more meaningful to you. No, it's a kilt. It's not only is it a Scottish kilt, it is actually made in Scotland. That it increases its value to you. And someone comes and says, hey, one second, that not is from Scotland. That is, look at this. It's from, whatever is Lungstown. This is that's where I was born. Wow. Born in Lungstown. Now it becomes even more meaningful. It doesn't take away the lower meanings that it had. Then someone comes and says, hey, you know what? This kilt, look at this thing. This is 2,000 years old. This was when Scotland was founded. Ooh, now it becomes even more valuable to you. It doesn't take away the original 3 levels. It just adds a whole new dimension of meaning. Then someone comes and says, hey, you know what? This kilt was actually owned by the first king of Scotland. Wow, this is right now. This is even more valuable. It doesn't eliminate the previous ones. It just adds on a new dimension of meaning. And then someone comes and says, did you know that this first kilt was owned by the first king? This was at the bar mitzvah of your great-great-grandfather, 10 generations ago. He was also born over there. He was a helper to the king. Wow, here it is. This is the kilt. This belongs to me. So I'm just giving an example. Maybe it's a pretty banal example, but it's the same type of a thing. Everything that there is in the world has some sort of a meaning, but the more depth that you add onto it, the more meaningful it becomes, until finally, the deepest of all the meanings is that it's you, right? This is really you. This is your thing. Okay, maybe the metaphor doesn't really play out, but we're saying the same thing. Everything there is in the world has a simple meaning to it, has a deeper and deeper and deeper, till it becomes more and more personal, more godly, more real to you. That's the whole idea. So the Rebbe took, just to bring this idea home, he took the sentence Modeh Ani Lefanecha that we say every morning, and he brought four meanings to it: Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. The simple meaning, the homiletic meaning, the midrashic meaning, and the Kabbalistic meaning. And he brought what those meanings are. And then he showed how Chassidut adds on this Yechida meaning, the ultimate meaningful, personal aspect of this sentence. So Modeh Ani we say every morning when we wake up in the morning. So it's a thing that we say. So now it's coming to tell us who we are. We have four levels, and then we have Chassidut adds a whole new dimension to all four levels. So if you remember what they are, let's just do quickly if we can. So Modeh Ani Lefanecha, simple meaning. You brought me back to life, God. I was asleep. I woke up in the morning. I'm thankful you gave me back a soul. Chassidic meaning, you gave me back a Jewish soul. Jewish soul is different than every other soul. Simple meaning. Homiletic meaning. Thank you, God. You brought me back from the dead. From this, we know that that's the simple meaning, right? If you brought me back from the dead. The homiletic meaning. One day there's going to be the raising of the dead. One day there's going to be the raising of the dead. Homiletic meaning. Chassidut says every instant and everything there is in the world is constantly being renewed from nothing to something. Everything is raising from the dead all the time, constantly. Not just one day it's going to happen, the dead bodies are going to raise up. Every molecule, every atom, every item, every person, everything in the world is being created constantly from nothing. Hasidic meaning. Then we have the midrashic meaning. What's the midrashic meaning? Midrashic meaning is, just as you give me back my soul in the morning, even though I haven't repaid you what I owe you, God, so also there's a command in the Torah that if someone owes me money and leaves me collateral, a surety, and he doesn't pay me back, I have to give him back this collateral, the surety, every morning for him to use in order to make a living. I have to give it back to him. That's the midrashic meaning. What does Chassidut say? Chassidut says this not only applies to that particular commandment of loaning money and leaving collateral and having to give it back. This applies to all the commandments. None of the commandments make sense. All of the commandments are pure godliness. Not just this commandment that I have to give back the collateral even though the person doesn't pay me what he owes me. Every commandment, none of the commandments make any sense. All the commandments are pure godliness. And that they make sense is a big miracle. Some of them do, but essentially none of the commandments make sense. There's pure godliness. That's the third. The fourth is Kabbalistic. Kabbalistic meaning is you gave me back my soul in the morning. That is the combination of Yesod and Malchut. Malchut is the world. Yesod is the above the world. Kabbalah. Chassidut says that the world is being created. This comes to show that the world is being created from God's essence constantly. Unlike the second meaning, the world is being created constantly. It's telling the world is being created constantly, yes, but it doesn't say from where. Here it says that God personally, his essence, is involved in creating every detail of the world constantly. That's the Hasidic aspect of Kabbalah. Okay, now the Rebbe is going to go over this again, but just to get over one more time, Chassidut is coming to tell us the Jewish aspect of everything in the world, the godly aspect, the essence aspect. So the simple aspect, how Chassidut puts meaning to the simple aspect, that God gives me back in the morning a Jewish soul. the Hasidic aspect of the homiletic meaning, that God creates everything constantly from nothing. The midrashic is that all of the commandments also come from God. They're above understanding. And finally, the Kabbalistic is that God creates the world constantly is coming from God's essence constantly. Okay, now let's see how this goes a little bit further. What's the point? The point is that it's giving us a little bit of a glimpse of the world that Moshiach is going to reveal, because Moshiach is going to reveal a true world. Namely, we reveal to us that all these things are really true. God really is creating the world constantly. God really does make a difference between the Jews and the non-Jews. God really is giving us the commandments that are above understanding. And the world is really being created, not just constantly, but it's being created constantly from God's essence. You might think it's being created by some aspect of God constantly. No, it's God's essence is creating the world. The world is very important to God. So here we go. That which Chassidut explained. These four different aspects of Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. I just finished telling you of Moda Ani. They're all attached one to the other. Hakarat Adam, the fact that man can recognize Shachirush Yesh Mi'ayin, that the renewal, the creation of the world from nothing to something comes from the essence of God. That's the Kabbalistic meaning. Kabbalistic, how Chassidut learns from the Kabbalistic, that it comes from the essence of God, which is above the worlds. Habir b'chilek. So that was the explanation that Chassidut adds to the mystical, the sod of the Torah, Modani. This mechazekat strengthens hakara, the awareness, shekol olamot, that all of the worlds, mitchadshim, are being renewed constantly, mi'ayin ve'efes, from nothing, and from total zero. What does that mean? Don't think that God is creating the world from some aspect of himself. So the world is being created from something else, right? There is God, and then there is God's ether, or God's powers, or God's emotions, and from those he creates the world. No, the world is being created from absolute nothingness, from God's essence, and there's nothing in between. That's the mystery of the Torah, how it's explained by Chassidut. God personally is creating everything. Habir b'chilek Remez. What did we say the explanation is in the Remez of the Torah, that God is creating everything brand new? This is that God is creating the world, right? So Kabbalah, the Hasidic aspect of Kabbalah tells us, yes, God is creating the world, but he's creating it from his essence. Because if the creation of the worlds was by means of, let's say, a sphere of Malchut, let's say God's kingship or something, McKeevan says almost, since the worlds would therefore take a place legabe, regarding God's aspect of Malchut, of kingship, creation, then it would mean that the worlds, they existed in some sort of a spiritual potential form, and they weren't being created by God in his essence. The world would be something like how the soul enlivens the body. That without the soul, the body would still exist. It would just be a dead existence. But Mikaven, since that the creation of the world comes from the essence of God, She'ein olamos topsim makom legabi klal, so the worlds don't take up any place by God at all. Hari ein shum netinat makom. There is no possibility that maybe there can be God exists and also something else exists that creates the world all the time, an aspect of God. No, it's not so. All there is God. How would the worlds exist? It's a pure miracle from the essence of God all the time. So you and me are miracles, and not just you and me. Every dog and every tree and every planet and every stone, because everything, the essence of the existence of everything, is not just being formed by or created by some aspect of God. It's coming from the essence of God. There's nothing else. So it's coming from true, if you want to call it, nothingness. The world is really absolutely nothing. If it's really nothing, then how does it exist? The answer is it exists because God really wants it to be here. And it's a big miracle. So the world is incredibly important to God. He personally is creating everything constantly. And the world is an infinitely greater miracle than we can possibly imagine, because it's not being created by any aspect of God. God, in his essence, is creating this physical world. He's creating you, he's creating me, he's creating every human being that there is in the world. So it comes out. If so, from this we can conclude that in this principle is the awareness, achdus, of God's unity. There's nothing except for God. That all the worlds, they are total, absolute nothingness. Regarding God, God has to create them all the time. The worlds don't exist. They are not even called a name. There's not even a potential. They're not even considered to be something secondary to God. Tofel. If so, Hari Nirgash. So if so, it should be able to be felt by you and me, Peshuto, simply, Pshitos, Shechayut Basari, that physical life, is really nothing at all. It's not even a secondary thing. What really then is existence? Hitkashus Belakus, attaching yourself to godliness. Like it says, a pshat, that's the simple meaning of Mode'ani. The meaning of Mode'ani, that you gave me back a Jewish soul. And the Jewish soul means what? All I'm interested in is God. That's what a Jew is supposed to be. You remember the Rebbe brought the story about Alexei and what was it? That the Rebbe Marash brought his two sons, and he said, I want to show you what the difference between a Jew and a non-Jew is, and he brought his non-Jewish servant. And he said, what are you working for? He said, that I could have some, a drink and a little rest afterwards and have a good time. And he called the Jewish servant that had the same IQ and the same, said, what are you working for? He said, I'm working in order to serve God, that I can pray. He said, are you really serving God? I said, oi. He felt so insufficient. In other words, the essence of a Jew is that he wants to be close to God. Why does he want to be close to God? Because he feels that somehow or other that God is the source of all being and that the world has no being on its own. From this awareness, that there is nothing except for God, so it's obvious it's by a Jew, that when you do what God wants, you cannot mix in, even as a secondary thing, shum tam betachlit acher, any other reason or purpose. Kol kiyumo, the reason that you do the commandments is only ratzon abor. This is what God wants. Why? Because everything I am and everything I have, my very being, I'm obligated to God. And God is so good. He's creating me all the time. And even better, he's giving me the commandments. How can I ever think of something else? Okay, like we said before, as Chassidut says, the drush of Modeh Ani. The drush of Modeh is doing the commandments. Why do the commandments? None of the commandments really make any sense as such. They all come from God. If you want to say that makes sense, but in the end, God doesn't make any sense. So what does Chassidut want us to do? It's a total change of how do they call it? A perspective. Instead of looking at the world that I really exist and maybe God exists, it's the other way around. That God really exists and I am just a miracle. I don't know how I exist, and I can actually do God's will. This makes everything in the world tremendously valuable and important and precious, because it all comes from God. But that's only if you look at it from God's point of view, and that's what Chassidut wants, and that's what Moshiach will bring about, because that's the truth. Yud Zayin. This aspect of Yechida that we talked about, of the soul, because it's an essence. In other words, remember, God is creating everything, but he is creating every individual thing. And so everything is different. And it's all somehow or other being created by the essence of God. And the connection between the uniqueness and the, I want to call it the onlyness of God, and the uniqueness and the miraculous existence of everything in the world, that's this level of Yechida. That's the uniqueness of everything, but it's also the power that keeps everything in existence. Well, this aspect of Yechida, because it's an essence, it doesn't in any way negate the lower levels. Exactly the opposite. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, and Yechida. Exactly the opposite. This enhances and brings out all of these different levels that we talked about. This is the difference between a revelation and an essence. A revelation, this is an individual item, separate from everything else. Therefore, in Yanim she'enum gilui, anything which is not revealed, shalom, is thus nit air. This is not the thing. Eino hu, it is not the thing in itself. They also gilui b'mispasha, because it has to be revealed. Let's take a person we have in the world, right? What makes people in this world, what people think is life, meaning? If you're famous, if you have a lot of money, if you have power, if you control, how much you're revealing yourself. Revelations have to be depend on something else for their existence. They have to be recognized, and they also have to be different from everything else. Which is not the case if you have a thing which is an essence. Who atzmius shall call in? This is the essence of everything. God, for instance, God is the essence of all beings. So God is present and the essence of everything. And if you look at it and you see, the really fact is that there's nothing except for God. So to look at the world from this way, it means that your search for meaning should be your relationship with the creator of the world, because that's your essence, and not so much your relationship with the world itself, how much you receive from the world, etc. But it should be with the world itself, what God wants you to find from the world. So God put us in the world, in order that we should do what God wants to in the world. We should affect the world in a positive way. So that's our essence. Our essence is the godliness that gives us a purpose in the world. So it's more what we give to the world, not so much what we receive. This is, of course, the famous story. I've said it before, that the Beit Yosef, Rav Yosef Karo, that he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. Well, he wasn't supposed to have written the Shulchan Aruch. That was like the consolation prize. God told him that he was going to go to the land of Israel and that he would be burned there on the stake for Judaism. And this would benefit the world tremendously. And he was very happy. What would he be happy for? Nobody would even know who he was. You know how many Jews died on the burning on the stake? How many famous Jews, how many great Jews, how many holy Jews? We don't even know who they are. And he was very happy. And finally, God said, I'm sorry, there's some reason that you can't, you missed on the first prize, you get second prize, and that is to write the Shulchan. The Shulchan Aruch is famous. Everybody knows, every religious Jew knows who Yosef Karo, a Sfardi, is. Everybody, every normal religious Jew knows who he is, except for the Maimonides, perhaps the most famous person in Judaism, maybe even more famous than the Maimonides. Who knows? And that was a second prize. He didn't want that. He didn't care about the revelation. He cared about the essence. And therefore, hadgashot, one of the stresses, the main things that Chassidut stresses is uniting all of the details with the essence. And this will be understood even more from the life that Chassidut puts into all these different four types of the four types of interpretation of Modeh Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. Okay, I think we can try to do it a little bit quickly and see how it works. So I think we're going to have to try this next time. No, let's do it now. Come on, let's do it. Come. Okay, what does Chassidut explain? Chassidut wants to put into the aspect of Chassidut. This puts a new way of looking at the Sfirot. It puts a new, that's the Kabbalistic. Chassidut puts a new way of looking at the commandments. That's the Midrashic. Chassidut puts a new way of looking at the creation. That we said was the homiletic. And Chassidut puts a new way of looking at a human being. That's going to be the next page. That's the pshat, the simple meaning. So let's go. Sfirot, the secret, and we're going to have to do this over again. Malchut itself is united with Yesod. That's what we said, Melech, Malchut, Chai v'Kayam. Means that it becomes one unity. Melech Chai v'Kayam becomes one thing. The living king, Malchut and Yesod unite. So therefore, this idea of unification means that it all unifies with the Creator. Yesod here refers to every level that is above creation, Yesod. This shows that the fact that there is nothing except for God, this doesn't mean that there are no worlds. When it means there's nothing except for God, it means that there are worlds. And that the worlds themselves, as they are in their existence, they have to be united totally with the oneness of God, because God is one. Same thing with the commandments. That's the drush. The commandments on themselves, they're all separate, they're all different. But the essence, the truth of the commandments is that as different as they all have to be unified with God's will, which is above reason. Also, the part of the how Chassidut looks at the creation. The creation, that's the remez of the Torah. That's the world, how it sees, how it appears to us to be a real separate existence. Well, and therefore we can't really feel the new novelty of really what the world is, how the world is being reunited every moment. But the fact of the matter is that man and the world being renewed every morning, this is not just a thing that is a side, this is the essence of everything being created constantly, not just the feeling or the externality, but the essence of everything is being created brand new, just like the world was created the first time. And finally, we have how Chassidut, so we've discussed how Chassidut looks at Kabbalah, unification of Melech and Yesod, namely the essence of God is united with the world, how it unites with the commandments, that the commandments come from the essence of God, as different as each commandment is, but it's all of them together, and each one individually is totally united with the oneness of God. That's what Chassidut does, Yechida. We talked about also the world which we said is being renewed all the time, but it's renewed, all of its details are totally one with the essence of God. And finally, what Chassidut does with man, that's the pshat. This is that a man has to give thanks that he is a Jew, and the Jewish people are totally different, like the Holy Temple is different from the rest of the world, because the Jew is a person that's united with God, like the temple was, and this comes to show that all mankind is united with God. And the Jews have a special job to do this, like the Holy Temple had a special job to do this. So all of them show, on one hand, the uniqueness and the essence of God, but on the other hand, it brings out the uniqueness of the individuality and the existence of everything that there is in its separate, unique state. Whether we're talking about man, whether we're talking about the world, whether we're talking about the commandments, whether we're talking about Kabbalah, all of these are unique, but united with God constantly. As we'll talk about more, God willing, next week. Thank you very much. Have a good week with Moshiach. Now.
Yeah, also stay healthy.
You too. Shalom.
Thank you. Shavuot tov.
Shavuot tov.